kidding. I drive a Prius, no way to make that look cool. Let's start the video. Awesome, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You too. Today, I was going to film something outside, but as you can tell, it's a little gloomy. So instead, we're gonna pivot. Today's video is about getting better looking footage with any camera. And I know what you're thinking, that sounds a little too good to be true. It's actually not. Okay, well, when I say any camera, any digital camera, so if you've got a film camera, I can't help you. But for the most part, you should be able to make your footage look better with the techniques I'm about to show you. And if you haven't figured it out yet, today's video is gonna be all about color correcting and color grading. Now, all those words mean is color correcting is getting your image looking closer to real life. It's correcting things like if the shot was underexposed, overexposed, if it had a bit of an orange tint, a bit of a blue tint. That's color correcting, and that's what this video is mostly going to focus on. Then there's color grading, which is actually adding a stylized look to your video, making it look a little more professional. This isn't a super advanced video, like I'm not going to make you a professional colorist in like 10 minutes. But what I can do is tell you the simple way, the basic ways to make your footage look just a little bit better. I'm just trying to get you started, right? This is something people dedicate their careers to, getting very good at color correcting and color grading. We're not going to do that, but this is going to be a basic entry-level video. Anyone can follow along, and it's going to make your footage look better. So I'm going to do this by just going through a bunch of examples. I edit in Premiere Pro. You can do this in DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut. Most not super cheap editors should have all the same tools, or at least the very basic ones that we're going to be using today. So let's get into it. So as you might have guessed, we're going to be doing color correcting and color grading, so we're going to switch over to the color tab. So click that, and you're going to see some new panels pop up, primarily this Lumetri color one. If yours looks different, you might have this closed, you might have some of these open. These are just tabs within it, but what you want is that Lumetri color window. Now, for whatever reason you're not seeing that, don't panic. For almost any tutorial, this is just good information to have. If you can't find a window they're using, odds are they just went up to window, and they found it. So for me, Lumetri color, and there it is. So inside basic correction, you're going to see most of the tools we're going to be using. Okay, and there's also one more window I like to have open, which is Lumetri Scopes. If yours looks like this, or any of this, again, we're just going up to window, Lumetri Scopes, and there you go. You can resize this, do whatever you need. I generally find, depending on how much you use scopes, we're not going to touch them too much in this video, so we're just going to have them kind of small on the side. I want a big window so I can actually see what I'm working with. Okay, so now if you don't see these scopes, you can right click here. These are all the different type of scopes you can use in Premiere Pro. I'm personally using the Waveform Luma and the Vector Scope YUV. Some people might like the histogram. Some people like Parade RGB. It really just depends on what you're doing and personal preference. I use these two. This one on the left, all it's doing is showing me where my colors are at. So if I drag this to this, we've got a bunch of orange, which is yellow and red. Got a bunch of blue now. Double click to reset that. This one, which is your Waveform Luma, shows you the luminance values in your image. So down here at 0, these are blacks. So if I drag down blacks, my image is a lot of black. If we drag up my whites, that actually didn't do as much as I thought. But everything at 100 is white. So you see this light in the background is white, and I know that because it corresponds with the histogram. If that's confusing, don't worry too much. We're barely going to use them for the purpose of this video, but it's nice to know what they do, and if you just play around with your settings, you'll kind of figure it out. Okay, so anyways, let's start color correcting this clip. So this first clip is just me. It's me sitting in my studio. And right off the bat, just looking at it, it's way too dark. So over here in the basic correction is everything we're gonna need. So let's up the exposure. So I'm gonna go over to the exposure slider. Just slide that up a bit. Maybe that's a little much. We'll do like 0.8. And honestly, that image is looking pretty good. Now, what we actually did, if we go over to Effect Controls, just in the top left here, is as soon as you drag any of these sliders and you're over a clip like this, you've got the clip selected, you're adding the Lumetri color effect. If you want to toggle it on and off, you can just click this. So that's how our clip was, straight out of camera. That's what we did to it. And honestly, that's pretty good. Aside from the underexposure, this was actually shot pretty well in camera. Looking at my skin tones, they look a tad orange. So if we just take the temperature slider Just drag it down just a little, subtle changes. Maybe take out a little bit of that pink. And I'm just gonna lift the shadows a little bit. That's like the worst frame I could have stopped on. But that's actually looking quite a bit better. So again, we're gonna toggle it on and off. That's how it looked straight out of camera. It's not awful, just not great. And with those minor changes, I'm happy with that. That was a pretty easy clip to correct. This would be ready for color grading. This next clip is from a while ago, as you can tell just by like the stuff in my room, my hair, things like that. And this one needs a lot more work. So the thing that jumps out to me right off the bat is that the temperature is just horrendous. Like, I look like an Oompa Loompa. It's just orange everywhere. So what we need to fix is the white balance. I'm actually gonna zoom in. What's nice is if there's something white in your image, or something that's supposed to be white, you can grab this little eyedropper tool. So I'm actually gonna click this mic in the background. And it doesn't always do a perfect job. I would say that's too cool. But it's normally a good starting point, and if I just finesse it a little, maybe get rid of a little more of that green, that is worlds better. So the next thing I'm noticing is there's just not enough contrast in this image for me personally. And one reason for that is we're actually not maxing out our dynamic range. So typically we want our blacks to be at 0 and we want our whites to be at 100. If we look over at this Lumetri scope, you can tell nothing in this image is actually hitting that 100 white value. So I'm going to bring up my whites just a little until that's kind of touching. Right about there. And my blacks are fine. I'm happy with that. You can see if we drag them, all of a sudden my shirt just becomes a solid black color. Now I'll go like slightly down. And I feel like my face could be just a tad brighter, so I'm going to bring up my highlights. And I'm going to adjust that temperature a little bit more. And honestly, I'm pretty happy with that. It's not a great looking image. Frankly, nowadays I would be unhappy with it. But compared to what it was at the beginning. So again, effect controls, toggle that off. That's what we started with. This Oompa Loompa, horribly orange tinted shot. I would be embarrassed to even post this. Just something that's respectable. So let me reiterate, we're not trying to do just some crazy color manipulation, cinematic magic to these shots. We're color correcting, which means we're just trying to get this to look natural. How it should have looked at a camera, how it kind of looks when you see things in real life. That's the goal here. Now, there's not necessarily a set formula for color correcting. You can do things kind of in any order you want. If you're still a little confused, let's go through it all real quick. So let's go back to the beginning. Right now, the white balance is off. How do I know that's off? Well, everything looks orange, but you can tell just even things that are supposed to be white. For example, that microphone in the back. These whites are not white. The color pure white does not really exist in this image. So we wanted to fix that. Next, the image has sort of a green tint. So that's why we added pink with the tint slider. Everything else is just trying to dial in that exposure. So I don't think I did this the first time. We could brighten it a little. I think this image is a tad dark. So we brighten it a little. Make our whites just a little brighter, a little whiter. And if we wanted to, we could add some contrast. You can see what that does. You can take some away. You could do the same with saturation. But the goal here is just to get the clip looking natural. So let's move on to the next one. Notice how these are kind of getting progressively worse. So when I look at this image, the first thing that jumps out at me is I hate it. So much about this just does not look very good. First off, it still has that orange tint. It seems really desaturated. It seems to lack contrast. There's no pop. Just, it looks awful. I hate it. I hate it so much. But let's see if we can work some magic in post. So, again, looking at it, I honestly can't really tell what I'm working with. This image is super flat, so I'm just going to add a little bit of saturation, a little bit of contrast. We might get rid of this later, but I just need to see kind of what's going on. And you can see that kind of shows how orange I am. I mean, I'm just orange, Oompa Loompa-esque. So we need to fix that. So again, I'm going to go into that temperature slider, bring it down just a little. I still can't really see what I'm working with. I want some more saturation in here. Again, we'll probably get rid of this, but sometimes it just helps when it's super, super desaturated. Let's fix the exposure. So I'm going to bring that up just a little brighter. I'm actually going to bring my blacks down to see they kind of touch the bottom there. Bring my whites up. This clip needs a lot of contrast, so let's go to 33. I'll bring the highlights up a little, the shadows down a little. And now I can kind of see what I'm working with, so I'm going to take out all that saturation and kind of actually find what I want. And I can still see that my skin is just way too orange. So let's go back to that white balance. And you'll notice as you change things, like if you crank contrast, you're adding saturation to the image as well. So it is a balancing act. It's kind of going back and forth and seeing what looks good. So I'm just trying to fix my skin, because if skin tones are off, everything's off. And it feels just a little green. So add some pink. And you'll notice I'm just playing with these sliders. Like I can't just tell you, take this one to 20, take this one to 10. And it varies with every clip. So I'm just playing around here, seeing what everything does. If one slider affects another, I have to counterbalance it back out. Alright, and this looks better. Again, we're only really touching the basic tools. Notice how there's all of these different tabs of other things we're not going to get into really this video. And Premiere doesn't even have the most. Programs like DaVinci Resolve have way more things you can do. But just sticking in the basic correction, go back to Effect Controls, toggle it off. We started with this, which speaks for itself. And we took it to this, which is a little bit more presentable. And I'm just going to keep flying through examples to help you out. So let's do this one super... Wow, that's the best frame to stop on. Let's do this one super quick. So my white balance was completely off in camera. This is terrible. I remember I actually was using a SL2, I think it was. And it wasn't my SL2, so I just grabbed it and started filming, and the white balance was set to like tungsten or something. Okay, I can't look at this. Hold up. Okay, maybe my face is just weird. Every frame I stop on. That'll do, even though it's a little blurry. Okay, so looking at this, it's super pink, it's super blue. Let's fix that. Let's add a little bit of warmth to it. I mean, just look at my skin just from that little change. So I'm going to get rid of just a tad more. It's just those little adjustments. Let's bring the scopes back up. So this is actually an example where you can get a little bit trickier with it. So notice how there's like no detail in the sky. It's kind of blown out. So if I bring down my whites, we can actually get a little bit of that detail back. And if I bring down my highlights, sometimes that helps more. Now you got to be careful. If you crank it all the way down, my face looks super desaturated and frankly kind of creepy. But just little adjustments to that can sometimes help if you're trying to retain detail. So maybe we bring the shadows up a little, add some contrast back. I feel like I'm still looking a little pink looking at it again, so down. Maybe bring that to like 40. Maybe go just a little bit of exposure. And I'll add just a touch of saturation. And here's our before. Here's our after. So much better. And it really doesn't take that long, especially when you get good at it. Oh man. This clip still haunts me to this day. Let's see if we can make it a little better. So, right off the bat, you can just tell I'm completely underexposed. I'm dark, I'm in the shadows. So we're just going to bring that exposure up. Not too much. Maybe to about 1. I'm losing all this, so this is all pure white. Let's see if I can get some of that detail back. So you'll notice I'm mostly just affecting back there. And if I bring it all the way down, there's a lot of detail that comes back. But we do lose some detail elsewhere, like in my face. So let's just... Actually, I'm going to go a little farther. Let's go like there. Maybe bring up our highlights. Bring down our shadows. We'll make this one a little contrasty. Oh, and I almost forgot. My skin looks terrible, so we got to fix the white balance. So let's go. It's honestly just kind of red, isn't it? Notice our blacks aren't really touching, like the smallest amount is. And blacks are touchy. If you just drag it the slightest bit, your image starts to get really bad. But if there's no black, maybe a -1 doesn't hurt. Okay, I wasn't originally going to go into this, but what the heck, let's teach one more thing. So if you go into curves, what I'm trying to fix right now is just my skin looks really red and it just looks off. To me, it's way too saturated. So I'm going to zoom in, just going down here, hit 100%. I want to bring down some of the saturation in these reds. I also just didn't have great skin when I shot this way back when. So I just selected it with the eyedropper here. Now we've got our points on this graph. This is hue versus saturation. So we're affecting the saturation in the colors selected here. So if I drag it up, I turn into the world's worst sunburn victim. And if I drag it down, we get rid of that super harsh red that was just like attacking me. So I'm actually just gonna drag it down to here. And I feel like my face is still just kind of red. So going to hue versus hue, we're gonna select a hue and change the hue. So again, I'm just gonna select that red with the eyedropper tool. You don't have to, you can also just select the colors here. And I wanna shift that color. So if I bring it up, I start to look pink. If I bring it down, I start to look like the Incredible Hulk. But it's just finessing it. So I want my reds just to be a little bit more orange, a little bit more skin tone, kind of hide some of those blemishes. So you'll notice that's not a lot. Like, I didn't do a huge change, but I think it definitely helped. So I'm gonna close that, get out of curves. Oh, by the way, that was hue saturation curves if I didn't say it. Go back up to our basic correction. I just want a little bit more exposure, just like a hair. And that looks kind of half decent. So again, toggle off the effect. That's what we started with. That's what we ended with. And I think it's a lot better. Now it's worth mentioning that I'm showing you some of the worst shot, just terrible looking clips I've got in my hard drive. A lot of the time, if you shoot well in camera, these are just minor tweaks. I mean, it's just like, whoop, 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 move a couple sliders, you're good to go. Okay, and if you've been here this long, you're in for a treat. This is sort of the grand finale. We're gonna make this shot, actually this series of shots, just look awesome. So if you've got a bunch of clips that were shot in the same place and you're like, I don't necessarily want to do this to every single shot in my timeline, there's a bit of a hack. So let's just go down here to the bottom in this project bin. We're gonna go new item and adjustment layer. Just hit OK to this. It should just match to your timeline. We're gonna take that adjustment layer, we're gonna drag it on top of the first clip, and we're gonna stretch it out over all the clips. So now if we click this adjustment layer, it's gotta be selected for this to work. We can adjust all the same things for all of these clips. So I've got a bunch of clips here that were shot, similar time of day, same camera, same settings, and we're gonna be adjusting all of them. So again, select the adjustment layer. Okay, and looking at this clip, we're gonna blaze through this. So it's looking a little green, kind of look like a turtle. So let's drag that to 12. I'm actually just gonna warm it up just the slightest bit. I'm gonna brighten it just a little. I'm gonna bring up my whites. Gonna -1 my blacks. Maybe add like the slightest bit more pink. If I scrub through the whole clip, good enough. But what you'll notice is we actually did those same adjustments now to every clip. So if I take that adjustment layer off, oh, this one looked bad, but it looks fine. This one looks good now, before it looked like that. And if the adjustment layer wasn't perfect, like some of these are, they just look a little different. This one might be, let's just say it's a tad pink for us. We can still just adjust that individual clip. But sometimes this just helps speed it up, get you a good starting place if the clips are shot the same way. So now what we're going to do is holding Alt on your keyboard, just while this clip's selected, just drag it up. Alt just duplicates it. So now I've got another adjustment layer. I'm going to delete the Lumetri color effect. If that was confusing, instead you could just drag another adjustment layer on top. Either way works, we're just trying to get another blank adjustment layer. I'm going to color this one differently just to get rid of confusion. Let's go mango. Okay, and now that I've got this layer set up, this is going to be our color grading layer. So I'm just going to go, where is it? Rename. I'm just going to call this one grade. And we're going to do a very, very simple color grade. So let's just try and stylize it a little. So for this particular grade, we're going to take the saturation out of the greens. I kind of like that look. It makes it a little bit moody. You can either click the eyedropper, or you can just come down here and make some points. So I'll just make them all in the greens and yellows. We're going to drag those down. So it means we're taking these colors and taking the saturation. And look at the leaves there. We're just taking that saturation out. And to complement that, I'm actually going to darken them. So we're going to go to Hue versus Luma and select kind of just the same colors. We're just going to darken that. So see that? Now if you go too far, you can get some weird artifacts like, that just looks awful. Ugh. Like a mutation happening behind me. We don't want that, so don't go over the top. And you know what, just for the heck of it, let's do hue versus hue. So again, I'm going to go into those colors. Now let's just add a little bit of blue to it. See how that does. Let's go back up to hue versus saturation. Let's click my skin tones. Let's add some saturation. So I want my skin to pop. I want it to be like a bright orange kind of color. Let's bring that up. And maybe even that one a little. So we're adding saturation to the skin tones. Now let's just say instead of the color blue, I want to add a little bit of teal. So let's take our hue versus hue, and let's just drag the blue towards the teal. So you can see, like, in the background, that's my buddy Mason. If you look at his clothes, we're just bringing those up closer to teal. That's way too far up here. Adding a bit of teal there. And you can still use the basic correction if you'd like. So let's just say I want some moodier shadows. So let's say I wanted to bring that down to here. Maybe add a little bit more contrast. Let's say I want to bring up my blacks. Bringing up your blacks gives you kind of that faded look. Just a little bit. And then you've got something that looks like this, which is kind of cinematic, kind of cool. I actually don't love it. I was kind of just messing around with the sliders there. I'd fine tune it way more. And now that grade is across all of our clips. So here's what the shot looked like straight out of camera. Here's what everything looked like. Here's with the color correction. Here's with our color grade. And that's a totally different image. I mean, check that out. Get rid of both those. That's what we started with. That's what we ended with. That is what we started with. That is what we ended with. Okay, so this video took way longer than I thought it would. I actually went through more examples, more in depth than I was originally planning, but hopefully you found it helpful. And again, this is just the bare minimum. These are just the basic tools, very basic things to making your images look better. I'm sure professional colorists, if they saw this, they would start cringing because we weren't really using our scopes as much as we should have. We weren't using a lot of other tools. We weren't doing everything necessarily Hollywood correct. But the goal for this video is to just get you into color correcting, get you into color grading, dip your toe in the water so that you can learn more in the future. This is one of the easiest and most cost-effective ways to get better looking footage, so hopefully you found it helpful. As always, my name is Winiarski. Thanks so much for watching. Have fun, stay creative, and I'll see you all in the next one.